Okay, Tansy Saigon Uchilita. Hello and welcome to our today's session, Cultural Safety in Indigenous Community-Based Research. This is the third webinar in a six-part online learning and discussion series taking place this winter and spring 2021 on decolonizing community-based research, hosted by Community-Based Research Canada. My name is Julia Coburn. I'm the CBRCanada Program Coordinator and the moderator for today's session. So first, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that CBRCanada, the Secretariat, is situated on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. In the spirit of reconciliation, CBRCanada is committed to engaging with and learning from diverse Indigenous peoples and communities across Canada, as well as addressing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. Each week we have webinar, we'll have a TRCA call to action that we feel kind of represents the talk for today. So this week it's call to action number 14. A little bit about the Community-Based Research Canada. Our mission is to advance community-based research excellence in Canada by strengthening partnerships, bridging capacity, mobilizing knowledge, and championing CBR among individuals, communities, and institutions. For 10 years, CBRCanada has brought together key players of community campus partnerships. So we have quite a full session today, wonderful speakers, and so we'll have a little bit of time for question and answer at the end. If you have questions and comments, please leave them in the chat box or in the Q&A box. And also just to let everybody know, this webinar is being recorded. So you can come back early next week. It should be posted on our website under Get Involved and under webinars and discussions. So without further ado, I'm so pleased to introduce our wonderful speakers for today, Elder Mike Standup, Renee Mashing, and Carrie Martin. Elder Mike Standup is a traditional spiritual healer and teacher from the community of Ganawake of the Mohawk Nation. He has been doing this work in the Montreal region, as well as the city of Toronto and Southern Ontario since 1990. Mike is completely honored to have assisted and witnessed the spiritual awakening and transformation of many people who have sought his counsel. Mike currently works in the city of Montreal with various organizations such as the Native Friendship Center of Montreal, the Native Women's Shelter of Montreal, and the Association of Suicide Prevention for First Peoples of Quebec and Labrador. He has also recently been appointed as one of 2 healers in residence for the First Peoples House of McGill University. Mike's work in his home community is done through the Family Wellness Center of Ganawake, as well as private sessions from home. And Renee Mashing began working with CAN in 2005 and is presently the Director of Research based in Nova Scotia. Renee is a member of the Six Nations of the Grand River and of Irish descent. She was adopted as an infant and grew up in a family of Eastern and Western European heritage. Professionally, Renee's energies are passionately committed to Indigenous health and wellness. Her work in the Indigenous HIV/AIDS community began in 1995, and she's honored to contribute with dedication and determination. Renee earned degrees in social work and psychology at McMaster University with a CIHR Research Award for her Master of Social Work. Renee's research interests focus on community-based research frameworks, Indigenous knowledges, ways of knowing and doing, and community health with an emphasis on HIV/AIDS, and more recently, STBBI. She lives as a visitor with her husband, sons, and pets by the ocean in Mi'kmaq territory. And last but not least, we have Carrie Martin, who is a Mi'kmaq woman from Listuguj, who has spent the last 20 years working in the field of Indigenous women's health, with a particular focus on HIV. Carrie's leadership is well established. She was the harm reduction coordinator at the Native Women's Shelter of Montreal for 12 years since 2018. And until 2018, and a tireless advocate for Indigenous women living with HIV. She was also a civil society member of the Government of Canada's delegation at the 2016 United Nations General Assembly high-level meeting on ending AIDS, and is an active member of the CIHR Canadian HIV Trials Network's Community Advisory Committee for a number of years. In 2012, she became a founding member of the Indigenous Health Center of Jojiake, and was the first president of the board of directors. In March 2018, she transitioned to the Canadian Aboriginal AIDS Network as the Indigenous Women's Research Coordinator. She has also started her PhD at Concordia University. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome our wonderful presenters and let you take it from there. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Julia, for getting us up to steam. It's much appreciated. It's just like to say hello and welcome to everyone who's here today. Here in Montreal, it's quite the gorgeous, bright, sunny day. So I wanted to begin by giving this processions a little bit of an opening with an offering of thanks and gratitude to the forces of life that have gathered us here today to speak, to hear, to communicate, and to bring our knowledge, and to bring our questions, of course, into this whole mix. I want to begin by giving thanks and gratitude to an unusual occurrence early this morning. I was awakened at 3:30, about 4, to the heavy rumbling and shaking of my entire building as a result of the first thunders of this year, or at least the first thunders we've experienced in this region. And I jumped up and I'm like, wow, oh, thunder, they've returned. So I rushed to the window and looked out and gave a nod, closed my eyes, and said a little word to the thunderers and welcoming their return. It's greatly needed in these parts and greatly needed at this time for their medicine, for their shaking, and for that negative charge to cancel out our own negative charges. So I just wanted to begin by giving thanks to that part, to the spirit world and to the natural world for giving us a wake up, or giving me a wake up call anyway. So yeah, quite the experience. I'd almost forgotten what thunder sounded like and felt like. Yeah, it was such a relief. I take my hat off to them. So, and to their many returns for this season again. So today began in on that footing. I of course went back to sleep, so I didn't want to be zombie-eyed for today. So I went back to sleep and gathered my forces this morning and came upon several things that I thought of or asked of the spirit world to come into my mind, to come into my voice today on what to speak about. I won't be too long in my session here. I like to keep it short but sweet, and to provoke some deeper thinking on not only the subject at hand, but teaching oneself discipline, self-discipline, respect. And I think that's the very first word that entered my mind when I began to think and feel on our sessions here today. Utmost respect is something that's cultivated. Of course, we know that respect is two-way street. And to begin in a respectful way, I just wanted to invite the Great Spirit into these processions at this moment, to help us with our thoughts, to help us with our voice, to help us with our hearing, so that clear communication can take place. And the respect and the acknowledgement of those forces of life is the standpoint from which our people operate. It's the standpoint from which our people exist. And it's the standpoint from which our people live, love, and heal together. So again, it's the word respect keeps jumping out into my mind frame right now. So I want to say that for respect to be effective, we have to remember that it begins at home. Respect begins at home in your mind. Respect begins at home in your heart. Respect meaning self-respect, and that's utmost at this point. For if we are to receive respect from others and the outside world, that inner self-respect needs to come first, and it's something that we need to work on. It's something we need to cultivate, something we need to keep communicating with ourselves about in order for us to be in good communication in a respectful way with each other. So again, the reminders of keeping that respect at the forefront of our thinking, as well as at the forefront of our words, to think first before we speak. And if you're thinking respectfully, then your words will be respectful, and it will be taken as such. Cultural awareness is part of that respect, and that gratitude for the presence of our people, of our cultures, and indeed of our many hundreds of different languages across Turtle Island. Every healer, every ceremonialist, every practitioner of every natural medicine coming from the native world have always instilled in myself, and something that I've always taken as a huge learning and teaching from the elders, was that they always, their mindset when it came to healing was that you are already healed. There's nothing to be healed. It's just a reminder that your good mind is always present with you, and that healing will always be in accordance with how you think. So every ceremony that they perform, every ritual, every healing session always comes with that mind frame first, that there is nothing wrong with you. You are well in your spirit. But of course, it's the mind that wanders, that we have to keep in check, and the mind that wanders that we need discipline, and again, to affect the power of your mind, because it is a very awesome force when you use it correctly. And indeed, it is an awesome force when you use it incorrectly, because we see the results of the two-way use of that. So basically, my teachings here today is to bring us online with that respect for yourself, to keep that going, to keep bringing that forward. We have a new generation of people who are extremely interested in our way of living, in our way of life. Even if we do live the modern way, it's there's a certain mindset within ourselves that we carry that still comes from the ancient way. We still live some ways the old way in our minds, even though we navigate through an urban jungle or an urban forest. But the organization and the movements to use your good mind at all times as best you can. And that applies to the subject here at hand on cultural safety. Again, it's with utmost respect that we approach each other, sometimes tentatively, because we're not sure on what we want to say. We don't we do become hesitant as to how we word our questions too, but it's always taken in the way that we understand. And I'd like to bring about that point of bringing that respect into the realm of cultural safety. When you use your words not so much as the words themselves, but with their intent, with the vibration you use. If you're genuine in wanting to learn the truth about, say, native culture, or even about traditional healing or medicine, which is, of course, my specialty, we invite people to be as straightforward and as honest as you can be, not to worry about stumbling over your words. As long as you're honest and straightforward in what you're asking, we will be more than happy and more than open to answer questions or share a story, share an experience. You know, just as I was very happy to share my early morning experience with you all here. I thought it was very awesome and very timely that the thunders came and, you know, for me, eradicated some unnecessary thinking. I was getting a little nervous and antsy about coming on today and speaking, but the thunder just seemed to dispel all doubts in my mind. So it's that asking of the forces outside of ourselves seemingly, but the forces within, and those spirit forms, that spirit life comes to assist you when you ask. And when you feel doubt, you know, just pause and take a few moments, take a deep breath. To regather your words, to re-centralize your thoughts and take it from another base, make a base in that 10, 20 seconds of pause, just to refresh your mind, to let your words come forward again. Take deep breaths and feel. Coaching myself through this as I'm speaking now, because there's times when we all run short of words. And so I'm approaching that moment now. So, but in any case, I see some laughing faces there. But in any case, today, I just again wanted to bring this this point of view of how Native people view life, how we approach life, into this context. It's a different way of looking at the world, but it is a way that we're willing to share, and we're willing to teach, and we're also open. We have been open, of course, to being taught other ways as well. Over the course of how many hundreds of years now, we've had European contact. We've had plenty of time to absorb the European way of life into our minds and our thinking. And to me, that's wonderful, because it's been, how can I say, 500 years of plus of discovery, at least for Native people, both the good and the bad. And for me, it's high time now that many of Europeans who have and descendants who live here on Turtle Island have now begun to ask the questions about Native points of view of how we live our life. They're actually now just discovering America after 500 years, the truth of America, and the people ourselves, of course, who like I said earlier, who live here and still operate according to that ancestry, and who, of course, still operate according to that mind frame of that really hasn't changed a whole lot over the centuries, the millennia. We still carry on those ways. And it's always with the, like I said in the beginning, utmost respect for oneself. Teaching that discipline of respect for yourself helps you to become more aware and sensitive to the needs of others. So it's that kind of, take those moments to stop and feel and select your words, but also for asking as well of the spirit world to come into your mind and to come into your voice, which is part of my practice as well. my daily practice, not just in advising others, but in advising myself as well, to be in touch with spirit. Because at various times in your workings, you find that you're speaking from someone else's voice, someone else's thoughts enter into your voice. And sometimes I'm sitting there scratching my head and I'm thinking, gee, who is this speaking through me? You know, I'm not that smart to come up with this. You know, it's like, yeah, some very powerful intelligence just entered my being. And for whatever reason, that intelligence knows me better than I know myself. And so it speaks. It speaks on behalf of the people, the audience, the people who are present that need to hear that information or need to hear that sharing or that teaching. So it's always, I'm always flabbergasted, usually by the response or the reaction to the crowds later on after speaking. And I'm just wondering, like, what the heck did I speak? You know? And people ask questions, and they're very, very pointed questions. And I have to stop and say, yeah, what the heck did I say? It wasn't me speaking, so I'm standing here answering the questions for someone else who spoke through me. And for the life of me, I'm just scrambling in my brain. Yeah, what the heck did I just say about half an hour ago? I don't remember. But it's cool that way. You know, I really, really dig that. I really enjoy that when that happens, because I know for myself, I'm on a different realm. And I'm learning from this voice that speaks through me as well. I'm just as much a student as everyone else. So it's almost like I can step outside my body, you know, and I could clearly see myself speaking, but at the same time, I'm listening to this fabulous voice speaking through me. And with its intelligent words and its amazing wisdom from where I have no idea where it comes from. But I do know before speaking, I tapped into it and I asked for its help. I asked for its advisement. And I asked that spirit to share its teaching with the people who are present at these proceedings. So to me, that's always been a hallmark of my work. If I can call it my work, it's really someone else working through me. So I sit with you here today. I'm in my pleasant little kitchen here, and it's 20 degrees outside early. Well, it's just past lunchtime. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful to sit here. And I'm on standby because right now somebody else is speaking through me, you know, and it's happening right now. There's a higher mind, or I could say my own higher mind, that's speaking through me right now, reaching out to all of you. You know, and so this is the essence of what not just Native culture is about. This is worldwide. This is universal, and it's important for us to maintain contact with that side of our life and that side of ourselves, our spirituality. We need it ever more so now, more than ever, and so we keep maintaining that contact. It's a daily practice. It's almost an hourly practice. It's for me, it's that constant. Specifically because of the work that I do, I'm in constant contact with people. In many cases, hands-on healing. And in those areas and in those realms, it's important to be with one another in that way. And just want to take a moment to thank you, Zoom. Okay, because this is a wonderful way to gather in this way, and blessings to that. But at the same time, we are electrical beings. Our bodies give off a vibrational, electrical, and magnetic charge, which doesn't always translate in this way. There's nothing like just a personal sit down face to face, heart to heart. And so this is how and why we really need to be with one another in that level. Healing occurs by just sight alone, you know, just by that feeling of knowing that, see my good friend is just down the street, and I see him or her walking toward me, and yeah, all my lights go off, and it's just like open arms. So the teachings and the healings and the gatherings, in that sense, our people always lived and thrived in that setting, in that environment. Our children were raised that way, and the loving nature in which we were raised was always, again, the bulk of our people on Turtle Island were of a matrilineal society, especially in my culture, Mohawk culture, Iroquoian society. It's definitely female oriented, and by that way, of course, it reminds us of our foundations of the earth in which we live, in which we stand and sleep and sit, and we're provided for by our Earth Mother. And so our society is based on that same blueprint. And so the women of our society are the caretakers of the land, and the raisers of the children, and the caregivers of the crops and the foods, and the foraging of food. So essentially, nourishment is our society, from the land and from the waters. And I just want to bring a point about the waters as well, which is especially important. That's something to be brought into this area that I feel now that we're gathered here. Water is a representation of our spirit life. Water is also life itself for our physical being here on earth. And indeed, the bulk of our body, 75% of our physical being is mostly made up of water. And so it's with the water in mind that I bring these teachings and these words yet again, as I had done so in the past. The teachings of the water that's important to sustain our life, but also the thought and the speech that comes from water. Last night, early this morning, water spoke. Water spoke very loudly in the terms of the thunder. And without that water in the atmosphere, there's no charge of electricity either. So water, again, I just want to stop for a moment and give ultimate gratitude to the water, and my love to the water for sustaining all of us. So yes, again, water is the blood flow of the earth, the blood flow and the life flow of ourselves. And from that foundation, and from our maternal upbringing, this way of nourishing one another, of feeding one another in terms of food and material supplies, also translates into this spiritual realm as also to give us the inspiration and to give us the words to speak, and what we need to teach, what we need to bring across to our fellow human beings. So with that, I can feel that the helium is nearly all out of the balloon. So I will leave these words and these thoughts with you all today, to let it absorb, ponder in your mind, and of course to bring up some very important questions. So in going over it one more time, essentially, cultural safety is like a small child being held in its mother's arms and being raised, comforted, and being given that place of safety within a mother's arms and a mother's care. And so as I'm speaking that, I'm thinking of my mother, I'm thinking of my sister and my niece, and of course, all my mothers, grandmothers that came before. So I just want to bring that essence and that feeling of that safety in terms of culture, and cultural safety is the responsibility and the respect that we have for our mothers and our mothers to be. So with that, I leave you all at this moment, and I'm looking forward to hearing the words from Carrie and Renee. And I just want to say thank you for listening, and peace out. Take care all.
Well, and thank you so much, Mike. I'm not quite sure how we follow up, Carrie, but we'll try. So I'm hoping that my internet is all going to remain stable. It's apparently down in the office, so we're on to the hotspot. Julia, can you help us with the slides? I'm not sure if I have the view set up properly to be able to see that that's turned on now. Awesome. Thank you so much. And so Carrie and I are going to be mindful of time and really would like to be sure that there's a chance for questions. And when we were invited to have the opportunity to share and speak in this session, we knew that we really wanted to begin in a good way. And so, Mike, I can't say enough thank you for helping us to share what was meant to be said today and to bring those good words. Very quickly, we had our bios introduced as we started. Thank you, Julia. But to take a moment to acknowledge and to honor and self-position ourselves a little bit. I'm calling in today or zooming in today from Mi'kmaq territory on the east coast of Canada, Nova Scotia. And it's possible for me to do this work and to be part of this community of researchers, largely because of the wonderful support I get from home. And so it's important to me in these presentations to take a moment to acknowledge, and particularly in this picture, my home fire with my partner and our sons, and the four-leggeds who also help to make a day go well. So to recognize that and to honor, my many roles professionally as well as personally as a mother and a sister and an auntie. And I'll leave it there and pass over to you, Carrie.
Hi, everyone. Yes, Mike, you're a tough act to follow. You definitely said that. Hi, everyone. As Julia mentioned, my name is Carrie Martin, and I'm calling in today from the unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka people, of the Mohawk people. I live in Montreal. And my father is Mi'kmaq from Listegich, Quebec, and my mother was Norwegian descent. So I have a nice mixed background. I'm also doing my PhD full-time right now in social and cultural analysis. And as you can see in the picture, that's my 2.5-year-old son getting into my face cream because, a little bit of a monkey, keeps me on my toes. And yeah, he's kind of my inspiration. Happy to bring him into this.
100%. So we're kind of the, I suppose, the academic side of the presentation, and hope to be able to offer a little bit of context and perspective around what this idea of cultural safety might look like. But I'm already seeing from the wonderful comments that we're certainly in a community of practice and a community of colleagues who know as much or probably more than we do. So really hoping that we can offer some insights that we've gained through our experiences, and then have that chance, as Mike said, to be learning along together as much as we have anything to offer, that we look forward to what we get to take away. And so when we begin and think about the context of what cultural safety might be about and what cultural safety and research is about, Carrie and I have the luxury, not only, the stress perhaps of following Mike and the luxury of following Charlotte Lopey and Jeff Redding's presentations, sorry, Sharky. And that was a presentation about a month ago that really recognized what the legacy and context of research in Canada might look like, including the ongoing realities of colonization. And so that we know that this is, Mike, you said such a nice context that we've learned European ways, and that's internalized in our populations and processes, hopefully the good as well as some of the struggles that brings. That we know that there's policy entrenched in law in Canada, and that there has been a legacy of stereotype and harm and influences on how we connect in different ways with education and with research, particularly in the context of this presentation. But one of the really wonderful lessons and gifts that I think that I've been offered particularly through the CEO of our organization, who was the first person I heard speaking about this, was the notion that we are all treaty people, all of us in Canada, and that we're bound together through the promises that our ancestors made to each other, through the commitments and the willingness and the expectation, whatever the intention was, that each brought to that process of treaty making, of agreement making, of peace and friendship, of sharing territory, of coexisting in a territory, that really calls us all into a conversation. So when we think about Indigenous work and we think about Indigenous research particularly, that's a commitment that we're all part of, and it's not unique to one side, or perhaps that there isn't even a need for sides, that we're all in this circle. And I think that's been a really powerful place to come from in the way that I've been approaching my work more recently. Thanks.
So these are some of the documents that have, they're important documents that have helped us at CAN, at the Canadian Aboriginal AIDS Network, to shape the environment in which we're doing our research. So we find that they're important and valuable documents to understand, and they're kind of a guiding post. So what we could recommend is that, take the time to read them, but take from them what's relevant to you, like we do with cultural safety. So cultural safety was originally intended for healthcare settings, but we've taken that and we've applied it to our research context as well. So what we can ask is, or what we can suggest to you is that you just take the intention and the teachings that apply to you and apply to your work and apply them in research. So think about how you can adapt these to your own practice. Next slide.
Just love that there's construction going on with big trucks right at this time of the presentation. I'm so sorry. So again, the idea of cultural safety, it really builds on context around cultural sensitivity and cultural awareness and cultural humility. Not to suggest that there's a hierarchy, but there's a kind of a circle of ways that we understand how we bring that utmost respect into the way that we do our work. And so this terminology, certainly we want to acknowledge that it began with work in New Zealand from Aotearoa. I'm sorry, my pronunciations and accents are terrible, and really was advocated by Maori nurse who began to speak about cultural safety, and it was certainly taken up internationally. What she recognized in her practice and her experience was that it really requires, when we think about working respectfully and that with that utmost respect, that we pay attention to social justice, to equity, and to power dynamics particularly, and thinking about how all of those things play out for ourselves and in the ways that we may understand the other, and even in that process of creating an other reality, that we can sometimes set ourselves apart in ways that aren't helpful and aren't meaningful, that we forget our shared humanity. And certainly if we think about cultural safety and this effort to find ways to label and understand and capture the way that we want to work together, that there are multiple cultures at play. And this might be a bit of an acknowledgement of intersectionality as well, recognizing that there are cultures that we bring ourselves personally, that there are professional cultures, institutional and social cultures, for example. And so the description that's listed here, I'll have to go back to the Ryerson paper in the chats, Jody Lynn. The description that's offered here, as Carrie has said, speaks particularly to healthcare delivery. But again, I would invite you to understand the goal of cultural safety is for all people to feel respected and safe when they interact with research. And that culturally safe research is free of racism and discrimination. And people are supported to draw strengths from their identity, culture, and community. And when we start from that place, that's a really powerful way to engage together. Thanks. Next slide.
I think when I look at this slide, I think Mike pretty much captured this really nicely when he was talking about being self-aware and stop and feel. So we all bring our personal identities into the work that we do. Our personal identities shape us. We have multiple professional identities. We have other contexts like our age, our race, our gender. All of these things shape how we interact with people. So we need to be aware of where we're coming from and how these factors are impacting how we relate and how we interact with each other. And like Mike said, we need to be self-aware of how exactly these are shaping us, and recognize that everyone is bringing in these different contexts and these different identities into the work that we're doing. So it's about paying attention to how these different cultures, how they work well together and how they may conflict. And that conflict is not necessarily bad, but that we need to find a way to work through that conflict and work through these different cultures. So like Mike said, be self-aware, and stop and feel.
All right. So when we think about cultural safety in research, I think one of the places that that again has been really grounding and exciting, and you know, we haven't, I suppose, spoken too much about the context of this national organization that we work with, called the Canadian Aboriginal AIDS Network. So perhaps as I think about the power of the understanding that research is ceremony, what we've learned in our context as a national organization, we began to engage in community-based research in the late 90s. We've been developing a program of research and a research unit within our organization to come to understand ourselves as having a very specific research mandate that's shaping how we understand the work that we're doing. And so we've been involved in research projects that range from something that's quite local through to international opportunities for international engagement. And really, you know, what we're learning and seeing in our research is that process matters as much as the outcomes. Sometimes it feels like the process has been even more important than the findings. Certainly, you know, understanding that when we get engaged in research, that when you come into a process, and I'm sure I'm singing to the choir, many of you will know this, but when we get involved in this research work, this enterprise of learning together, that if we haven't been changed by the process, by the people we're working with, that we're not doing it right. And when we are open to that kind of opportunity and that connection to others, that there is ceremony in the ways that we interact and engage. And so in that respect, the relationships are the heart of the work that we're doing. And it's certainly surrounding that and the responsibility, the policy that shapes and grounds how we come to our ceremony. So we, you know, in a European context, we might talk about ethics. I think in an Indigenous context, we talk about protocol. And while we could understand that there's a different nuance to those words, the heart of it is that we're really mindful and respectful in the ways that we engage. And so ethically, when we think about being safe in research, and particularly thinking about Indigenous research and cultural safety, that we recognize the collective ownership of the information that's being shared. It's not just my story that's being shared. My story has been shaped by many others and is owned by many others. Particularly, of course, that we want to see Indigenous control of Indigenous data. And that's about being able to control and understand the story and how it's interpreted and how it's shared. And that in the context of the work that we're doing at CAN and the work that we do in community-based research, I'm sure all of us would agree that community involvement at all levels, in all decisions, in all aspects of the research enterprise is when we really shine and when the work comes together best. Thanks. Next slide.
Like Renee said, relationships are at the heart of this work. And so we need to make sure that we invest that time to build those relationships and to build that strong foundation. I think, Mike, you spoke so eloquently about the trust and the respect, and to have these mutually respectful relationships. And I think we have to give ourselves that time to develop that trust. That's not going to happen overnight. And so this is an ongoing journey, and we're on it together. And so we need to take that time to do that well. We also need to keep in mind and remember that there are cultural variations, not just between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, but within nations and across nations. And so we need to keep that in mind when we're moving forward with our work, and remember that it's important to take the time to ask those questions and to do it in a respectful way, and to find out from the participants what it is that they need and what it is that is going to work for them, that's specific to their culture. And doing all that while also keeping in mind that Indigenous people a lot of Indigenous people, not all, have had negative experiences with research in the past. And so this is why we emphasize the importance of relationship and trust and respect and developing that over time. So the change can happen and research can be done in a good way, but a lot of time needs to be invested in making sure that that's done well. And recognizing that we need to take that time to really listen and think before we speak. So we received that powerful reminder from Mike. Again, Mike, I think you've done this presentation for us earlier, but thinking before we speak. And I think that was a really powerful reminder that we need to speak with intent and that our words have power. So we need to be cautious of how we use those. Next slide.
I have somehow managed to get out of sync. Isn't that fantastic? Excellent. All right. I'll come on to the presentation slide and stop trying to follow my own. So when we think about that practice of research design, and we hoped in this presentation to bring a little bit of balance of some of our experiences to try and be concrete, as well as to offer what we've learned along the way. And so, Mike, I would certainly invite you to comment further here, but that when we think about how we approach research and what it might mean from CAN's perspective to be culturally safe, then certainly that begins with seeking out elders to be engaged in our research. And really, I hope in our growth and evolution, recognizing that part of that process is asking our elders, we would like you to be involved because I have a sense of wanting to be grounded, to be guided, to be educated, to come together in ceremony more explicitly by bringing cultural practices into our work, but also in meeting and reaching out to our elders to ask, how would you like to be involved? What would be interesting to you and exciting to you in this work, in this research enterprise that this process that we're engaging in, and what might that look like? So that when we engage with our elders, it's that chance to give and take and to learn together, and to really ensure that we're not saying, could you come and open our meetings with a prayer, and then if we have a question about culture, could we come back to you? But really recognizing, how can you be involved? How do you want to be involved, and what do you want to contribute? Because we really need that guidance and essence throughout the work that we're doing. And that can also mean, certainly with CAN's work at a national level, that we ask elders to be involved with our projects, at guiding the overall activity that we're doing, but also then being mindful if we're doing data collection or visiting or attending a conference, that we reach out locally, so that we recognize the diversity across our communities and respectfully meet in places and territories. I'm looking at the time and realizing I'm going to jump over community-based research principles, because I hope and I expect that we're pretty grounded together there. Julie, what was that last section on that previous slide? Sorry, just briefly then, thinking about building and community supports, that as we do this research work and have the chance to identify what's available, what services are could be changed by the research, by the process, by the opportunity to engage in a research project, how might we work with people locally or to bring people into research, so that when we leave, when a project is done, something has been left behind in the community and something has been built and new connections might exist that we've been able to help to support. Thanks, Julia, that's good.
Yes, I'm also aware of the time. I want to make sure that I do this justice, but I'll try to speed it up. So the linguistic collaborations, I think it's just important to note that a lot of Indigenous people, and I'm speaking from a Quebec context here, I think it might be similar in Canada, but not all Indigenous people speak French or English as their mother tongue. And so a lot of Indigenous people, especially Inuit in Quebec, speak a Nutitut first language, and French or English is their second, maybe third language. And so just remembering that there could be some, I don't want to say issues, but there could be some more time needed to help them comprehend and understand what's taking place in the research process. And other sources of misunderstanding that we noted here, the importance of nonverbal communication, like Mike had also said earlier about silence, just letting people take that time to be quiet and not always feeling the need to fill that gap. and recognizing that there could be uneasiness with intrusive questions. Some questions are difficult to answer, and giving space to honor that. Next slide.
So what we know, what we've learned, what we see in our programming, what we're reminded by our elder, Val Nicholson, particularly as someone who I hear reminding us, is that culture saves lives. And in Can's work and research, and I hope this speaks to cultural safety as well, that that when we bring culture into the ways that we're doing our work, and when we bring culture in through ceremony, when we bring culture in through asking, how do you connect here in this play, in this context of the work we're doing, in the place where we're doing the work, what's a respectful way to engage? What are the local norms? What are the important considerations that will make it possible for us to come together? That's when we have the most success. That's when we have the most engagement. That's when we know that the research work that we're doing is meaningful. And so, and particularly in our context, that we've learned that that HIV has opened doors, an HIV diagnosis can sometimes open doors that can help to reconnect with culture. And that's been really, really important as well, including that through our research projects, there's an opportunity for people to engage that may not have been known previously, may have always been there, but may not have been known. And again, I think we'll just keep rushing through the. Go ahead, Carrie.
So what we have learned, I'm going to stop really quick. I think be honest, be genuine, and be respectful in your communications and in your intentions. And I think that captures it beautifully.
Excellent. And then I think that we might have come to our last slide. And Carrie and I certainly knew in putting together these slides that we were following Mike. So but what we had to say would be hopefully complimentary, but not as well, different. But as we started this work and started preparing this presentation and thinking about what is cultural safety in research, we had the opportunity to also think about another extension of the concept, and thinking about how we might operationalize cultural safety, and really what does it mean to create a culture of safety within a research team, within an organization. And this is a concept that Dr. Karen Hill, who's from Six Nations of the Grand River Territory, has been beginning to speak to and represent. And so I want to acknowledge her good mind for asking that question, and I look forward to the next step of what does it mean to create a culture of safety, including safely acknowledging that we all have to be in different places. So Julia, I think that's good for the presentation. Carrie's and my contact information is on the next slide.
Well, thank you so much, Mike, Renee, and Carrie. I mean, I can only see all of the comments, and if I can speak for myself, and I'm sure many others, this was an incredibly refreshing, insightful presentation. It was wonderful to see how both of your knowledge sharing kind of did come together so beautifully today. I do want to take our last few minutes to ask a couple of questions from the audience. So I'm going to start here from the Q&A. So here's a question from Michael. It's so one question I have is, as a traditional person, I work in different ways that may not be able to be tied to a clock. Thus, or contributions as traditional people may not be able to be commodified by time. With that being the case, how do we commodify our contributions?
Well, again, it comes back to awareness of your surroundings and your settings. I know in some situations where healing is required, I've had many customers, clients tell me it feels like it's timeless when I come to sit and speak with you. And indeed it is, because on several occasions, many of my sessions go on for like up to 3 hours, whereas it seems like only 10 minutes have passed. So it's in these, I guess you can say time disappears in that sense. Time as we know it comes to an end. So it's more of a now moment. We're living in the now when that happens. As best as I can explain or answer that question.
Thanks, Mike. Renee or Carrie, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, full disclosure, Mike Parsons and I work together, and so this is certainly a question that that we're struggling with. So I appreciate you putting it out there, Mike, and appreciate we have to, maybe that's a key question for our discussion next week as well, to be able to continue to think about that, because it really is that challenge of, to be honest, we're facing that challenge as well, because Carrie has to go and present in class in 5 minutes. So we want to make sure we have a chance to close today's session well with Mike's stand-up. And so how do we acknowledge in a society and a context where time, where we acknowledge the contributions that somebody makes, in part financially based on hours, and your time is valued at $20 an hour. And what does that mean when, to Mike's stand-up's point, it may feel like we've been together for 3 hours, but it's only been 10 minutes. And so, and forgive me, that's a very, very, very basic, I say that with the utmost respect, but I understand it's a very basic analogy to try and make, but I think that's part of, really recognizing the gifts that we share, and how to bring that into the research work. And that's, I think, something that we're continuing to work on and learn about. So I would love some more discussion about that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. And definitely it's nice to have some questions that we can keep expanding on next week. I think we'll try to maybe get through one more, and hopefully we can keep talking next week. And Anderson was asking, how can non-Indigenous researchers conduct research in a way that could be considered ceremony?
Well, I could answer that by saying that all that really matters is your intent on what you want to do with your research or with what you have at hand. To see that the people you're working with are in a better space than when they first arrived to you. It's really, for me, it's a lot of intention, really, because what I come to understand is that whether we're Indigenous to North America or not, we have to keep one important aspect in place, and that is we are all Indigenous to this earth. We are all here together in this one sphere, in a realm. And we have to remember that. We have much to learn from one another, and coming from a standpoint of being Indigenous to this earth, I think is something that we really have to expand our mind to. So that will really help, that your country or your land of origin is rich, is absolutely wealthy in forms of ceremony and ancient knowledge. So it's to help you guys look back into your own ancestry and where those ceremonies and those practices come from. Whether they come from Ireland, whether they come from Germany, whether they come from Siberia or Japan, from Australia to Africa, there's Indigenous knowledge everywhere we go. And so it's just to be open to the fact that we are a global family.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I mean, Mike, I wish, like, honestly, just full of wisdom, and just, we're so appreciative, and honestly, what your words and Renee and Carrie as well, will just help sink and resonate with all of us as we come away from this today. We're just so appreciative of your time. I'm unfortunately going to have to wrap up. It's a very, I guess that's the Western part of this. We thank everybody, and we wanted to share that this webinar has been recorded. You can find it on our website, communityresearchcanada.ca/webinars and discussions early next week. Please join us next week. We'll be able to continue with these incredible speakers. Mike, Renee, and Carrie I'll be there. And so come together to continue this dialogue. So you'll be kind of an active participant in a discussion. So you can register by going to communityresearchcanada.ca/events. And also, please feel free to join our awards gala coming up. And so with that being said, Niawa, Walaliok, Miigwech, thank you to everybody, to our speakers, and we look forward to seeing you